Welcome back to the Defiant Spirit. I'm Baruch HaLevi, also known as B. Thanks for tuning in. It has been a minute since I've recorded here on the Defiant Spirit podcast. I want to get in today to talk to you about a podcast I just did with my son, Yehuda, and I'll put a link in the show notes where you can go and listen to it. He interviewed me. He started a podcast called Shadows and Shells, and it's getting into the shadows of human life and the shells, the masks that we all wear, that we all put up. And so I was fortunate enough to be interviewed by him, and it was an amazing experience. The topic is what I want to talk to you about today. Why haven't you killed yourself? Why haven't you killed yourself? It is a brutal question. It's a shocking question. Frankly, it's quite disruptive. I've gotten a couple emails because I actually wrote a blog on why haven't you killed yourself about what in the hell are you doing putting that out there without any warnings, trigger warnings. And fair, I get it. My daughter texted me after my blog went out to the internet and showed up on her phone, and all it said is Maya from Abba. That's Dad. She calls me Dad. Why haven't you killed yourself? And she texted me saying, "Is this cyberbullying? Like, what's going on here?" It wasn't personal to her. It's not personal to anyone. Actually, it's highly personal to all of us. Why? Because this is the question Viktor Frankl, my teacher and mentor, yes, said it a million times. I'll say it a million more. I have drawn this wisdom and much other wisdom from him. Why haven't you killed yourself? It's the question he would ask, the first question he would ask when a patient of his came in to see him on day one. He was a neurologist. He was a psychiatrist. He was dealing with people who were, dealing with clinical issues, were struggling, and he would cut through the bullshit and ask this question. I mean, this is not in the DSM manual. This is, abrasive to our 21st century ears and hypersensitivities when we have to say trigger warning on everything, and yet he wouldn't do anything other than go straight to the heart of the matter, because this is the question. This is the ultimate question. Why haven't you killed yourself? This isn't a depressing question. This isn't even about suicide. What Frankl would say is, sitting across from the person, all he would know about them is one thing. He may not know their background. Maybe you can't always tell, all kinds of details about a person's life. I just know one thing. If you come through my doors for counseling, for coaching, that you haven't killed yourself. Beyond that, we'll figure it out. Why? Why haven't you killed yourself? Because it's an option. It's a choice. Now, you may say, B, I've never thought about suicide. I've never considered it. It's not even an option. Of course it is. It's the ultimate option to be a human being here for a period of time. As I said on Yuda's podcast, a death sentence, you've been sentenced to death. So it's conceivable you could kill yourself, but you've chosen not to. And thank God for it. Please hear my message loud and clear. Keep on choosing life. Why? Why have you? I don't care what you've gone through. I don't care how bad it is. The fact that you're here means you found a why. Maybe it was something relatively trivial, like you had a grandchild's graduation coming up in May, and you just committed to staying alive for that. Or maybe it's you have a dependent, even like a dog that's nobody else is here to take care of, and you love that dog. Or maybe it's a cause that you're involved with, or your spouse, your children, a thousand things. Great. The more, the merrier. That's part of your why. So this question that Frankl asked was an invitation not to kill yourself, to dig into everything that has caused you to choose life, to say yes to life. That's one of his books, Say Yes to Life, in spite of everything. Frankl conceived of this, certainly lived it out during the Holocaust. In Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about the wire, the electrified fence around his concentration camp. He was in Auschwitz and Dachau, a few others. But that electrified fence, they would call it running into the wire, because that was probably the easiest way to kill yourself. I'm sure there were other ways. And there were many reasons why he chose not to. on a daily basis. That was the choice. And you may say, well, we're not in the Holocaust again, the death sentence and all kinds of shit hitting your fan. So just because his was more concentrated doesn't mean it has a different outcome. His outcome was ultimately potentially death in the death camps, and yours is life. And so he said, I could opt out, but I choose not to. I don't care how long I have here. While I'm here, I will drill down into my why. And that's the same with you. That's the same with me and every single person to have walked this earth. Now, unfortunately, not everybody finds their why. If you listen to the podcast, if you've read anything about me, by me, or listened to me, you know my father killed himself and my grandmother killed herself. And this issue just runs through my veins. Sometimes people will say, like, why do you keep talking about the suicide? Because it's that important. It's my why. My why is to help other people find, articulate, and live their why in 1,000 different ways, but that's it. And it comes from the fact that my father had so many whys to live for, but he couldn't find them. He wasn't able to locate them. How do I know that? Because he killed himself. Because if he found his why, he would still be here. He had 1,000 whys, but it doesn't matter that I know that. He didn't know that. Not in those final moments. And that's what it means. Why haven't you killed yourself? You haven't killed yourself, so why? And let's build on that why. And you better have a why to build on. Because you may think you're good right now, it's solid, everything's going your way. I have seen the greatest men and women fall from the highest heights. They thought they were powerful in their work, and then their child dies, and they have no frame of reference for this, and they have no skill set for this, and all the money in the bank can't solve this problem, and they're brought to their knees. They better have a why, and it better be bigger than going back to work. Your wife is cheating on you and you find out, and it's devastating. It wreaks havoc on your life, and you better have a why. And it can't just be the same old, the cliches that you've told yourself about the Hallmark card, like sifting through the aisle at your local Hallmark store, picking out, best of from the Father's or Mother's Day section. That's not it. That's not enough. And that's not yours. Yours is uniquely yours. Frankl talks about that every man, every woman has their unique task in this moment to fulfill, and in this lifetime to complete. And your life is made up of task after task, or your why after your why, and figuring out what it is and grabbing hold of it and holding tight to it. That's why you need a why. And that's why this question is so freaking powerful. It's also why I've reoriented my work around it. So I've been involved in many things over the past couple of years, and I've been evolving them with some great partners. One of the reasons why I've taken a hiatus on podcasting is because really had to work on the architecture of my different businesses. So one of the businesses is Defiant Spirit, continues strong. It's my coaching and counseling practice. I've really morphed more into coaching, and I can talk to you about that. But coaching, counseling for men and women, and heavily men these days, really focused on men, but certainly open to working with whomever, wherever. And then the Enneagram, as you know, I'm passionate about the Enneagram as a roadmap of living out your why, and I can talk more about that. But that's the Defiant Spirit. My business work is with my partner, Adam Katzen, and we've created 360 Consulting. You can learn more at 360consulting.co. And that's bringing the Enneagram and mindfulness to businesses, and we're doing that. And then the other thing, I have sort of the trinity of my work right now is Man Uprising. Man Uprising peer groups for men, midlife and onwards. And, so roughly 40, north of 40 and onwards, to bring men together in person in Denver, Colorado. We have fourth or fifth group rolling out here. And then virtually, we just rolled out our first virtual group, and we're going to be doing more of that. And so bringing men together to rise up in the second half of life, to answer this question, why haven't you killed yourself? And then to not only, again, it's not a question about surviving, it's a question about thriving. And how do we discover and live our why at all times in our life, but especially the second half of life? Well, I've been writing a book called Man Uprising, and it took me 2 years, but really a solid year. And then I finished it and I realized it's a great curriculum. It's the foundation of Man Uprising, the journey of these men, but it's not the book. It has elements of the book and it's really part of the book, but there's a lot of silliness in it. There's a lot of joking. I'm a jokester. There's a lot of just male stuff to engage men. And I had an incident maybe about a month ago at this point when I thought a friend of mine was suicidal and had killed himself. And it turns out, thank God, I was wrong, but I hadn't heard from him in a while. And I just took it upon myself to go check on him, and he lives pretty remote. And I found him on the floor. He had been lying there for a few days, and he had a medical, issue, collapsed, kidney failure, and he was hours away from death. And I don't know why, but I found my way there and got him to the hospital, and thank God he's on the mend. And it was a near-death experience, but I had thought going up there that it was by choice. I don't know why I thought that. I just felt it. It just felt real to me. And I realized as I was walking into his house and then not seeing him and then going into his bedroom and behind that door, I thought that it was like my father. I thought he had hung himself, or like my grandmother, that he had shot himself. I never actually saw my father. I was in Boston and my father was in Michigan. But I went to his house the next day, but I didn't actually see the aftermath. But I did see the aftermath of my grandmother when I was 15 years old. I talk about it in the podcast with Yuta, pretty gruesome. And I was triggered. I felt it all coming back. And I wouldn't call post-traumatic stress. It's been a long time, and doesn't mean that does make it stressful, but it's post-traumatic growth for me at this moment in time. And I thought walking in there, I was pissed. I'm an Enneagram 8. My easy go-to strategy is anger. Then I can get underneath it and feel scared or sad or whatever. But I was angry in the moment. And my initial reaction was, why haven't you killed yourself up until this point, my friend? What happened? How did you lose that connection, that thread, that why? And if I could hand you something before you walk through that door, or my dad walks through his door, my grandmother, or the countless men and women I've counseled over the years, unfortunately, some of them have taken their lives. Why? Why haven't you killed yourself? That's the book I wanted to hand him, not Man Uprising. For a man, for a woman walking through that door, having lost their why, put that book in their hands. So I've been reworking this book around why haven't you killed yourself? This topic is fresh on my mind. It's crystal clear. It culminates the work that I've been doing, I am doing, and I will continue to do. It is harsh. It is intense, but I don't have time, to fuck around anymore. I feel like I've been dancing around the clarity of purpose for me in this, and that is to help men and women discover their why, articulate their why, and live their why. And again, it's not about suicide. There are all kinds of suicide. There's active suicide, like my father. There's inactive suicide. I would call that drug overdose and, alcoholism, when you know that this is something that's killed your family before, and having type 2 diabetes and continuing to put on the weight and eat the sugar. That's inactive. It's indirect, right? And then there's passive, and that is just chronic. That is knowing that you're overworking and the stress is going to catch up with you, and you have history of heart disease. Or passive is knowing that your marriage is unattended and your kids are drifting and you're just not putting in any effort, and without them you have nothing and you're losing them. Or coming home and after work and just numbing whatever your drug of choice is. There's 1,000 drugs of choice. That's a passive suicide. So fine. So maybe it takes an extra 10, 20, 30, 50 years, but it's all the same thing. You're not really living. As Frankl says, you're not saying yes to life. And so it's not about one type of suicide. It's not about the literal sense of suicide. It's about living an uninspired life, living somebody else's life, living on autopilot or in reaction, and not living your unique task, your unique purpose, the one that only you can ever fulfill in this lifetime. Nobody else can replace you. You are not expendable. You are not a cog in a machine. You are what Frankl calls the defiant power of the human spirit. There never was, is, or will be another you. And if you're not living that all day, every day, then ultimately you're not fully living. And that's what this is about. It's not about death. It's about life. It's not about suicide and surviving. It's about living and thriving. And it's ultimately a conversation about your why. No, Simon Sinek did not start this conversation with his great book, Start With Why. If you haven't read it, it's a worthy book. And Frankl didn't start this conversation. He just lived it in the Holocaust. He quotes Nietzsche, "He who has a why to live for can bear with almost anyhow." And that was proven out for him in the Holocaust and each and every day afterwards as he rebuilt his life and learned to say yes to life and live his why. And that's true for each and every one of us. As he said, no, you probably haven't been, incarcerated in an actual concentration camp. But as he said, each and every one of us has an inner concentration camp. And when you're in that concentration camp, but if you haven't been there, you'll be there. Ain't none of us getting out of this without experiencing the concentration camp. It's hell. I've been there. I'll do a podcast on my inner concentration camp and how I came close to following my father's footsteps, but I didn't because I found my why. And when you find yourself in that space, or the day-to-day grind, or the seemingly ordinary mundane, and you're just not fully living, you better discover your why, articulate your why, and live your why. And that's what this is all about. So yes, why haven't you killed yourself and never choose it, and you never will if you know your why. So stay tuned. I'm going to be doing a lot of conversations around this. I'm going to get back into the Enneagram, have a great program called Own Your Number, revamped and ready to roll, and a lot of conversations on man uprising and masculinity and so much more. So thanks for sticking around, for being around this long. Jump over and listen to my son's podcast, Shadows and Shells. And his first one with his first guest was amazing too. Theo, you're a good man. And that's worthy to listen to. And I'm sure everything else that comes after will be just as awesome. And I'm very proud to be on there and have a conversation with my son. So go check it out. Until we meet again, defy your number, live your defiant spirit.